This is, however, a first print of the album, which was released in 1986. Okay, so I'll replace the dust cover. These were the lovely people who sold me the record. They run a great eBay account. I guess maybe I'll leave it. Gives it some character, right? I don't know. The album itself does have a lot of plain space, and that's kind of a bit of a blight, but then again, it's not like it's perfect around. Let's see if it's too much. Yeah, I think I want it to go. Let's see. While I do this, we can talk about Graceland, which is Paul Simon's sixth studio album. I have a lot more Simon and Garfunkel albums than I do Paul Simon albums. Besides this one, I really don't know any other solo Paul Simon albums besides mixtape of Mbakwange, which is South African street music. And Paul Simon visited Johannesburg and was inspired and created Graceland. And here he talks a lot about the music that inspired the album, which is heavily influenced by South African music. See, this one I don't have a problem with. So the album became his most successful and won him a Grammy. And it has artists like Linda Ronstadt, Everly Brothers, Rockin' Doopsie and the Twisters, and Los Lobos. How the album is not without some controversy. Yeah, so there's some tea. So, Rockin' Doopsie and the Twisters felt that Paul Simon heavily borrowed from one of his songs to create the song That Was Your Mother. And the lead singer, Alton J. Rubin, felt that most of the song was derived from his song called My Baby She's Gone. But there was no legal action. And the saxophone player from Los Lobos says that he basically came into the studio and they had no ideas and they took his for the song that he was on. But I find that weird. I mean, if you come on to work on a song, they're gonna take your ideas. But yeah. Nevertheless, this album is a classic. Yes, this dust sleeve is okay condition. So Paul Simon is definitely the lead producer on the album. And the album was recorded in the Hit Factory in New York City. And that has a very storied history with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, Rolling Stones, Peter Gabriel, Peter Frampton. So we have here Hall & Oates, Talking Heads, and they all recorded at the Hit Factory, and it was across the street from Studio 54, which is another nightclub of legend. So some of the controversy at the time was that Simon clearly made music and made a product from the country of South Africa, which had an embargo at the time. I don't know if it was official embargo, but it was sort of a spiritual one for sure. definitely part of the soundtrack of my childhood. Under African Skies. There goes that South African influence. Homeless. Crazy Love, Volume 2. That Was Your Mother. All Around the World, or The Myth of Fingerprints. So one of the stories that comes from the recording of this album is that the musicians he used from South Africa would typically get paid $15 an hour. Paul Simon paid them $200 an hour, which I guess is good, but is it worth your work, or is it just work in a studio? I'm not sure how musicians see that sort of thing. Feel free to school me in the comments. So personally, I didn't really know the rest of his album besides You Can Call Me Al until maybe 2019. Let's see, I think there's something else in here. Oh, awesome lyrics. Oh, I'm not getting rid of that. And I guess this is where the album was, which is it damage underneath? Why? Maybe they just did it. I'm assuming the eBay account gave it a new dust sleeve. I see it does have a little bit of a break there. Yeah, just do this. As I was saying, I